19 or 59 years, however many years it's been, but so happy to.
This clip right here may go down as one of the most iconic clips in basketball history, because what it signifies is the end of arguably the brightest young core this league has ever seen. A trio consisting of 3 players who individually won the MVP award. 3 players that will go down as a top 10 player in their respective positions. A core that was destined for greatness, and they're right here in the last game of their first and only NBA Finals appearance, with the oldest member of this trio being Kevin Durant, who was just 23 years old in this clip. And what's happened since? Well, a lot. A lot has happened.
James Harden, all of a sudden, 2-3 days before the season started, is gone.
Westbrook, the two-handed sledgehammer.
Kevin Durant heading to the Golden State Warriors.
Just got super excited as I was walking in here.
Westbrook, step back, puts up the 3, got hit, shot's good, and 1.
But what if? What if this trade never happened? What if OKC's management took a chance and went into the luxury tax so that they can keep this trio together? How would the NBA landscape change? Well, that's what we're going to explore in this video. And what if James Harden never left the Oklahoma City Thunder? Before we get started, please leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button. I would really love to take my time and give y'all 30-minute banger videos just like this video right here. But y'all know how the YouTube algorithm works, man. This thing loves its quantity. And the only way to beat that is to show crazy love to these videos. And for you guys to subscribe so I don't have to rely so much on pleasing this algorithm. Let's try to get this video to 7,000 likes. That would mean the world. Also, shout out to the OG what if maker in this community, Mike Korzemba. He did a similar video to this video back in 2016, but it has been 4 years since that video and a lot has happened in those 4 years. Russell Westbrook has won his own MVP, James Harden has won his own MVP, Kevin Durant has gone to the Golden State Warriors and won 2 rings and 2 finals MVPs and has left the Warriors. Long story short, enough time has passed for me to revisit this what if and re-explore what would have happened from my perspective. But with that being said, man, let's get started. Our journey obviously starts in the 2012 offseason, where this trade right here never happens, and they give James Harden the contract he wanted and dig deep into the luxury tax so they can keep their core together. I know they could have traded Serge Ibaka in order to not be over the luxury tax as much after re-signing James Harden, but let's just say in this hypothetical, the Thunder thought it was extremely necessary for this core to stay together and was willing to spend all the money on this team. Now, without Harden in 2013, the Thunder already won 60 games in the Western Conference and was the first seed. And while yes, they are better with Harden, especially for the next couple of years than they were with Kevin Martin, for this season alone, Kevin Martin was able to be a decent replacement for James Harden. So I don't think this trade not happening really changes that much for the Thunder, at least in terms of their regular season record. The Houston Rockets, on the other hand, now don't have James Harden. It was the biggest reason for why they won 45 games and made the playoffs. And in this hypothetical timeline, they instead end up with one of the worst records in the NBA. So then we get into the 2013 playoffs, and the Thunder don't even end up playing the Rockets with Patrick Beverley. So Westbrook never gets injured in the first round. Just a disclaimer for the rest of the video, we are still assuming that the same injuries happen, aside from injuries like this where it was caused by a specific player that they're not even playing against. The reason being is that if I just reset all injuries, I would also have to make my own rendition of these injuries, and trust me, this project is already big enough as it is, so just bear with me here. Anyways, let's just fast forward to the second round where the Thunder are matched up with the Memphis Grizzlies, who in real life beat the Oklahoma City Thunder in 5 games. But mind you, in real life, this was with Russell Westbrook being injured, and even with that, every single game still ended within 6 points. With Westbrook being healthy this time and Harden being able to pick up any slack, the Thunder actually end up reversing the series and winning in 5 games. Now we go into the Western Conference Finals, where the Thunder face off against the San Antonio Spurs for a Western Conference Finals rematch of the year prior. The series goes to 7 games, with the Spurs winning a very close Game 7, and we still have that classic 2013 NBA Finals we all know and love. Because of how weak the 2013 draft was, at least in terms of who was projected to go at that time compared to how they actually panned out, and the fact that the Rockets didn't have their own first round draft pick this year, even the team that actually had Houston's draft pick, the Atlanta Hawks, didn't even pick anyone significant to change anything drastically. The Rockets, however, still have the 12th pick in the draft from the Toronto Raptors and make a pitch to the Orlando Magic of a package similar to what the Thunder got in real life when they traded James Harden. However, this time it would be in exchange for the 2nd overall pick, where the Houston Rockets draft Victor Oladipo. The Houston Rockets end up getting the 2 guard that they want to build around for the future. Now, the Orlando Magic, being the Orlando Magic, draft Steven Adams just because A, they're the Magic, and B, there's not really that many guards in this draft for them to even draft if they wanted to base their pick off of need. Dwight Howard, who signed in real life with the Houston Rockets because they had James Harden, instead goes home to his home state and signs with the Atlanta Hawks to play alongside Jeff Teague, Al Horford, and the rest of the crew. The Rockets, having Victor Oladipo, take a chance at Paul Millsap and sign him for some sort of veteran leadership on this team. Now, in the 2014 season in our real timeline, Russell Westbrook does get injured this season and only plays 46 games, which does still happen in this hypothetical timeline. However, this is where it gets interesting. In the 27 games Russell Westbrook missed, Scott Brooks decides to start James Harden at point guard, and James Harden starts to have a come-out party and averages 23 points, 7 assists and 5 rebounds, statistics that we know he's capable of putting up. And the Thunder go 23-4 in this stretch. Mind you, in real life they went 20-7 in this stretch because of MVP KD and just how good he was, but with Harden performing this way to play alongside Kevin Durant, it isn't too much of a stretch to say that they can go 23-4 in this stretch. And now everyone's hyped for the Thunder. You have Kevin Durant as the favorite for the MVP, Serge Ibaka is in his offensive prime while still being one of the best shot blockers in the league, James Harden turns out to be much better than we thought. Just imagine until they get Russell Westbrook back, they're gonna take over the league. Russell Westbrook comes back late February, and Scott Brooks decides to keep James Harden in the starting lineup because, obviously, he's been playing really good. But then, the Oklahoma City Thunder go on a 4-game losing streak. Harden drops down to 20 points and 4 assists a game as a starter, and the core starts to have some on-court issues because you got 3 dudes that need the ball in their hands to be used to the best of their abilities, being on the court at the same time and not having the ball enough, thus not having enough in-game rhythm to perform at their absolute best. Things do gradually go back to how they were before the Russ injury, and James Harden is delegated back to the 6-man role in order to fix this exact problem. The only difference being now that the whole NBA knows that James Harden is more than just some regular 6-man. And then we get into the 2014 playoffs, where in real life the Thunder lost to the Spurs in 6 games in the Western Conference Finals. However, please keep in mind that Game 6 did go to overtime, so that series could have easily been a 7-game series. And throughout the series in real life, it was very clear that the Oklahoma City Thunder needed a true third option, because Reggie Jackson and Serge Ibaka putting up 12 points a game just wasn't cutting it. Now, luckily, they have James Harden, and he becomes the X factor in the series, and the Thunder actually end up flipping the series and beat the Spurs in 6 games, and now they're back in the NBA Finals for a rematch with the back-to-back NBA champions in the Miami Heat. Now, in real life, D Wade and Chris Bosh didn't play that well in the NBA Finals, and the same happens here as they start showing a little bit of their age. That three-peat fatigue starts hitting the Heat as well, and the offensive firepower of the Thunder this time around is just way too much. And the Oklahoma City Thunder end up being your 2014 NBA champions, and Kevin Durant captures his first Finals MVP. The Houston Rockets ended up having one of the worst records in the league again, and actually land themselves the 2nd overall pick in the draft and end up drafting Joel Embiid. The Bucks still end up getting Jabari Parker. The 76ers end up taking a chance on Julius Randle, as there really wasn't any clear number 4 pick in this draft, and the rest of the draft just ends up being relatively the same. In terms of who the Lakers pick, let's just keep it a buck. Them not drafting Julius Randle doesn't really change anything in the grand scheme of things, so I'm not really too worried about that, and also the players they could have drafted around this range isn't enough of a game changer to even mention. So let's just say the draft works its magic and everything just stays the same. Now, if you guys remember, this was the season Kevin Durant was sidelined due to a leg injury he suffered that year, and the same happens in this hypothetical timeline, except this time, instead of Russ carrying this team solo, now he has James Harden, who once again shows glimpses of what he's truly capable of, and the Thunder end up nabbing the 8th seed instead of the New Orleans Pelicans that year. However, with them facing the Golden State Warriors, the defending champs were just too much, and the Oklahoma City Thunder lose in 5 games, and everything else stays the same. The Golden State Warriors end up being your 2015 NBA champions. The Houston Rockets end up having another trash year in 2015 because Joel Embiid didn't play at all and ends up with the 3rd pick in this draft. Now, as we know, the Houston Rockets are a team that likes to retool and trade instead of just tanking. They already have Embiid, and unlike another organization out there that likes to tank, the Houston Rockets actually realized that it'd be kind of redundant to draft a center at this pick, and instead opt to trade their number 3 pick, since the consensus top 3 in this draft was D'Angelo Russell, Karl Anthony Towns, and Jahlil Okafor, with Cat and D'Lo being the favored number 1 and number 2 pick. So instead, they look at the Chicago Bulls, who've been rumored to be shopping Jimmy Butler, and they agree on a trade that would send Jimmy Butler to the Houston Rockets in exchange for the number 3 overall pick, where they can draft the hometown guy in Jahlil Okafor to properly rebuild along with other pieces that would make the trade work. Now, as we know, in real life, Jahlil Okafor doesn't end up being that dude, but at the time during the draft, it would still be a pretty valid reason for the Chicago Bulls to want the number 3 overall pick for this reason. The 76ers, being the 76ers, end up drafting Willie Cauley-Stein way too high because they want another center, and the rest of the draft effectively just stays the same. Victor Oladipo starts having a come-out party this year alongside Jimmy Butler, who was last year's most improved player, and the Houston Rockets, being led by these two, end up winning 43 games, good enough for the 6th seed in the Western Conference, and Victor Oladipo ends up winning most improved himself. Now, as Kevin Durant comes back from his leg injury, this is where it starts to get interesting for the Thunder. Egos start rising. Players feel as if they're not getting enough touches, nor the credit that they deserve. The 2015-2016 season also marks the last year of Harden's max extension contract that he signed back in 2012. And because of that, Harden trade rumors start rising as well. However, considering the fact that Kevin Durant was injured the year prior, and the year prior to that they won a championship, James Harden does decide to run it back one more time with this trio, with one ultimatum to the front office. He has to start this year, and he wants more touches on offense. So then they go into the 2016 season, and with them having to reintegrate Kevin Durant back into the team, and Harden being in the starting lineup this time, the Thunder end the season with 52 wins instead of the 55 they won in real life. But still, despite the slight dip in wins, everyone still knew how good they're capable of being when all cylinders are hitting. They were still a team everyone was afraid of, including the 73-9 Warriors, who they matched up with in the Western Conference Finals after beating the 67 win Spurs in the second round. The Thunder start playing whoever offense on Curry and end up going up 3-1 on the Golden State Warriors. However, as we know, starting in Game 5, Curry and Klay just turned on a switch, and the games became more competitive, and the fourth quarters became insane. And the Thunder suffered through the one big problem everyone has been worrying about with the squad, and that is, how is this squad going to close games? And let's just keep it a bean, even with rhythm and all the touches in the world, Russell Westbrook and James Harden, and even Kevin Durant to an extent, tend to underperform in these situations, especially in this stage of their careers. And they still end up blowing their 3-1 lead. The Warriors end up going to the NBA Finals, where they blow a 3-1 lead of their own. For a core that was supposed to dominate the league, the Oklahoma City Thunder have only made the finals twice in 4 years, and have only won it all in one of them, and aren't the team to beat anymore in the Western Conference Finals. That title now belongs to the Golden State Warriors. With James Harden wanting more touches and them failing to win a championship, he's just had enough, and he wants out of this situation. Kevin Durant, on the other hand, has already won a championship at this point. Unlike in real life, where he went to Golden State to at the very least be a champion for the first time in his life. Kevin Durant, regardless, is still in the prime of his career. And this is still the time in Kobe's career, Jordan's career, LeBron's career, Magic's career, where they were still in the best situations to win championships, bolster their resumes, and climb the all-time rankings. And with that being said, Kevin Durant does still go to the Golden State Warriors to accomplish just that, but I guess this time it isn't as bad because he's already a champion, and that whole he just wants to be in the best situation argument is more valid in this timeline than it is in real life. Not saying it is or it isn't valid in real life, I'm just saying in this hypothetical timeline, it just becomes that much more valid. James Harden, however, his number one priority right now is just to go to a team who's going to be willing to build around him properly in order for him to properly showcase his skills. Insert the Miami Heat, a team who was actually capable of signing a max free agent even after giving Hassan Whiteside that massive contract. Also, come on man, James Harden, Miami, that's a perfect match. That is a perfect match. Before we talk about the events of the 2017 NBA season, let's just take a break real quick, okay? Let's just pause real quick and shout out the sponsors of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. You can explore new skills, perfect the ones that you have right now, and just get in your creative bag. Skillshare offers classes designed for the real life, meaning that you learn skills that A, you handpick for yourselves, and B, apply to your own personal situation and where you're at in your personal journey. Not only that, but you will be introduced to a community of people just like you that will empower your development. One of the classes I've been watching lately is Make Your Art Time Management for Creatives by Liz Brindley. Listen, this is the script of this video. This is the video editing timeline of this video. The same week I'm recording and editing this video, I have a test on Thursday and a programming assignment due the same day. Long story short, time management isn't even a skill I want, it's a skill I need. And the tips she showed in this class, like making a schedule, eliminating excuses, and creating action steps, have really helped me stay on top of things as efficiently as possible so I can do good on these tests and get these banger videos out to you guys on time. It's curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you, and it's less than $10 a month with an annual membership. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare's premium membership. Shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. The break is over and let's get back into the video. James Harden is now tasked to lead the Miami Heat with Goran Dragic, Hassan Whiteside while he was still considered good, Josh Richardson, Dion Waiters, and a bunch of Rough Riders. And James Harden has a come out party and actually leads the Miami Heat to 54 wins, which in this conference is good enough for the first seed. However, Mr. Triple-Double, he still averages a triple-double and he wins MVP this year. Victor Oladipo continues his improvement, Jimmy Butler is still Jimmy Butler, and Joel Embiid actually has his first real season. And with that trio being as good as it is, the Rockets end up winning 53 games this year, which is good enough for the third seed in the conference that year. In the playoffs, James Harden leads the Heat to the Eastern Conference Finals. However, they would get mollywopped by the Cleveland Cavaliers in 5 games. The Golden State Warriors still do end up being the NBA champions, and now Kevin Durant is a 2-time champion with 2 Finals MVPs. Now in real life, the 2017 offseason was the offseason where Jimmy Butler was traded to the Timberwolves for Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and a couple more pieces. However, in this case, Jimmy Butler has already been traded to the Rockets, but the Timberwolves are still looking to trade. Paul George still wants out of Indiana. Now in real life, it was the Oklahoma City Thunder who were able to get Paul George, and at the time, let's just be honest, it was primarily because of Victor Oladipo and his potential to still be a star in the league. No one really knew how good Sabonis would end up being. He was just like an extra piece, like, okay, we'll get Sabonis. But that trade was mainly centered around the Indiana Pacers getting Victor Oladipo back. And without Victor Oladipo on the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Timberwolves become a more attractive trade partner for the Indiana Pacers, who have and are willing to trade Zach LaVine. So the two teams agree on a trade that would send Zach LaVine to the Indiana Pacers and Paul George to the Minnesota Timberwolves to pair him up with Karl Anthony Towns. Russell Westbrook in this scenario is more open to being traded as Harden and KD left him in one offseason. He wins MVP, but then the offseason prior, they're unable to do anything to surround him with talent, so Russell Westbrook now wants out as well. Russell Westbrook wants to play for a contender. Insert the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have a disgruntled Kyrie Irving who wants out of Cleveland and wants to be in a situation where he gets his due credit. Mind you, at this point, Cleveland's main priority was getting a Kyrie replacement with the hopes of trying to get LeBron to stay. Because after the 2018 offseason, LeBron James was going to be a free agent. The Cleveland Cavaliers, on top of that, also have Kevin Love, Russell Westbrook's former teammate at UCLA. And the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Cleveland Cavaliers do end up working out a sign-and trade that would send one Kyrie Irving to the Oklahoma City Thunder and Russell Westbrook to the Cleveland Cavaliers. With LeBron's looming free agency decision, Westbrook does only agree to a 2-year deal with a player option on the second year. The Boston Celtics, on the other hand, the team that actually traded for Kyrie in real life, well, they're stuck with Isaiah Thomas in the meantime, whose injury was much more severe than anyone ever thought it could be. The Houston Rockets still do end up actually trading for Chris Paul. because Chris Paul still wants to be in a new scene where he doesn't want to handle the ball as much. And the Houston Rockets in our timeline is still a perfect match in this case, and now have a ridiculous squad of Chris Paul, Victor Oladipo, Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, and the rest of the 2018 Rockets crew. James Harden this year proves how good he is even more and ends up leading the Heat to 58 wins and puts up good enough stats to win his first and only MVP. The Houston Rockets, on the other hand, have a ridiculous season, winning 65 games, the #1 record in the league. In the playoffs, the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers would meet in the Eastern Conference Finals, and while the Heat did have a better record going into this series and did have the MVP on their side, 2018 LeBron was just 2018 LeBron. And the Miami Heat will lose to LeBron and Russell Westbrook in a very hard-fought 7 games. In the Western Conference, however, the Golden State Warriors are matched up against the Houston Rockets. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I give the Golden State Warriors credit when credit is due, but this Houston Rockets defense in this what if is insane. Absolutely insane. Chris Paul, Victor Oladipo, Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker, and Joel Embiid with Trevor Ariza, Eric Gordon. Look, I'm going to be honest, I think this team is better than the 67-win team we saw in real life, who was able to push the Warriors to 7 games with Chris Paul being out for the last 2. And in this hypothetical, to be consistent with everything else, Chris Paul does still end up getting injured in the last 2 games. However, Jimmy Butler, Victor Oladipo, and Joel Embiid are still good enough shot creators to carry them into a Game 7 victory at home. The Cavs would advance to the NBA Finals, where the Rockets are without Chris Paul until Game 3, and LeBron James in this scenario actually is able to manage to steal Game 1, unlike what happened in real life. However, Chris Paul does come back in Game 3 and clearly becomes the difference between the games being close and them being 15-point game blowouts. And the Rockets beat the Cleveland Cavaliers in 5 games, and Chris Paul wins Finals MVP and his first NBA championship, and so does Jimmy Butler, Victor Oladipo, and Joel Embiid. Well, after the 2018 NBA Finals, LeBron still wants out of Cleveland. The squad that they were able to put together just wasn't good enough, and he still wants to go to the Los Angeles Lakers. You know, obviously to make movies. He's quitting basketball, come on now. With LeBron deciding not to stay in Cleveland, Russell Westbrook also doesn't want to stay in Cleveland anymore. He doesn't want to be left with LeBron crumbs, which, side note, is why Kyrie Irving wanted to leave, but that's neither here or there, that's for a different video. In this hypothetical scenario, Danny Ainge gets desperate on draft night and decides he wants to give up his last Nets pick and gets Cleveland to do a sign and trade that would send Russell Westbrook to the Boston Celtics in exchange for that Nets pick, Isaiah Thomas, and a couple more pieces to complete the trade. The 76ers, who didn't make the playoffs the season prior, end up having a top 10 pick in this draft, more specifically the 7th, and end up drafting Wendell Carter. Meh. The biggest winner of this draft is actually surprisingly the Utah Jazz, who owned the Thunder's first round draft pick in this year's draft. Now, in real life, this ended up being the 20th pick, and they traded that to the Timberwolves in exchange for Ricky Rubio. However, the Thunder just came off a terrible season and ended up with a bottom 5 record in the league after Westbrook left them. In this hypothetical, the Utah Jazz hold on to that pick and end up with the number 4 pick in the draft, where they select Trae Young. Now, remember, in real life, the Dallas Mavericks wanted Luka Doncic really bad, but in our hypothetical scenario, they end up drafting Jaren Jackson, who isn't that enticing to the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks, however, wanted Trae Young, and the Utah Jazz have Trae Young. So the Utah Jazz end up trading Trae Young to the Atlanta Hawks and a future first round pick in exchange for one Luka Doncic. Ladies and gentlemen, the Utah Jazz now have Luka Doncic, Donovan Mitchell, and Rudy Gobert. Insane. The Dallas Mavericks, on the other hand, take a big L in this draft, and so do the Grizzlies, who end up drafting Mo Bamba instead of Jaren Jackson. The 2019 Celtics, well, they become the 2019 Celtics but worse, which is crazy to say. Crazy. James Harden continues to put up ridiculous numbers. The Rockets continue their dominance. Giannis still wins his first MVP, and in the playoffs, the East turns out to be the same, with the Raptors still making it out of the Eastern Conference. The Western Conference, on the other hand, I don't know if you guys remember, but Kevin Durant was a man on a mission in the 2019 playoffs. After losing in 7 the year prior and not being viewed as this ridiculous super team anymore, Kevin Durant was playing with even more of a chip on his back and just goes berserk in the second round and averages 40 on the 3-seeded Nuggets. Up until Game 6, where Kevin Durant does suffer that same leg injury he suffered in real life. Now, I would love to say that for this what if that injury doesn't happen, but if you actually rewatch the footage where Kevin Durant gets injured against the Rockets, literally the defender didn't do anything. Kevin Durant just landed awkwardly, and to stay consistent with everything in this video, it would just be fair to still say that Kevin Durant still suffers this injury in this timeline. Steph Curry still does his magic and leads the Warriors past the Nuggets to be matched up with the Rockets in the Western Conference Finals, but without KD, the Rockets were just too much for the Warriors, and the Rockets are back in the NBA Finals. So now we have the Rockets versus the Raptors in the NBA Finals, where the Rockets do beat the Raptors in a more convincing 6 games, and the Houston Rockets are now back-to-back NBA champions, and Chris Paul wins his second Finals MVP once again as he picks apart this Toronto defense. Now, man, look, man, the 2019 offseason is probably the craziest offseason in this video. This is where it gets really interesting, and bear with me with all of these moves. Kyrie Irving's leaving the Thunder. They're just so bad, it's insane. He's leaving the Thunder. Paul George, who's been in Minnesota this whole time, hasn't really done anything significant, and he wants out as well. Kevin Durant in this what if isn't as looked down upon as he is in real life. A, because he was already a champion going into Golden State, and B, they didn't end up being this juggernaut of a team that they did in real life because of the Houston Rockets dominating the last 2 years. They're not the team to beat anymore. They're not this unstoppable force in the NBA. That, if anything, is the Houston Rockets. However, for a team that was supposed to dominate, for them to pull a 2008 Celtics and just win 1 championship is tough. Very tough. Kawhi Leonard, on the other hand, still leaves. I mean, if he left the Raptors after winning a championship, why wouldn't he do that now? Now, mind you, there is an arms race going on in the NBA to beat the Houston Rockets. In real life, the shift in the NBA goes back to teams being led by duos. In our timeline, there is still a super team, there is still a team to beat, and teams want to arm their teams in order to beat that specific team. So in this timeline, it actually happens. Yes, New York Knicks fans, it actually happens. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant signed with the New York Knicks on a discounted price. Why a discounted price? Well, they also traded away the number 3 pick in the draft to the Minnesota Timberwolves and worked out a trade that would send Paul George to the New York Knicks. So now, the New York Knicks have Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Paul George. Kawhi Leonard, on the other hand, he's going to the Lakers. Kawhi Leonard is going to the Lakers to team up with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Kemba Walker, instead of signing with the Boston Celtics, who don't need him now because they have Russell Westbrook, instead signs with the Miami Heat. Kemba Walker is going to a contender who needs a playmaker on their team to play alongside James Harden. The Clippers, they don't get anyone. The Clippers don't get anyone. And man, oh man, is it looking interesting now. We got the back-to-back champions in the Houston Rockets with Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, Victor Oladipo, and Joel Embiid. We have the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Kawhi Leonard. And we got the New York Knicks with Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Paul George. The West essentially becomes a 2-man race between the Rockets and the Lakers, who both finished with 61 seasons, or at least, on pace for 61 seasons, because, the bubble. The Knicks, on the other hand, are actually a good team this year because, mind you, Kevin Durant didn't play in the 2019 NBA Finals where he ruptured his Achilles. However, Kyrie does still suffer his injuries, and while the Knicks are still a competitive team, they could definitely be better with Kyrie there, and they finished the season with a record on pace for 52 wins. The Miami Heat, on the other hand, end up winning 60 games themselves with the addition of Kemba Walker and the improvement of Bam Adebayo, alongside James Harden's regular amazing play. The Boston Celtics, they're just an on-court mess, and their chemistry just isn't good, but they are still good enough to finish with a top 4 seed in the conference, and the Milwaukee Bucks still do finish with the best record in the NBA. The Bucks were able to beat the Knicks in the second round in 6 games, however ran into the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals and ran through the same problems they do in real life. Out West, you already know what time it is, man. The Houston Rockets versus the Los Angeles Lakers. Who wins? I got the Lakers winning this in a very hard-fought 6 games. I just think while Oladipo, Jimmy Butler, and PJ Tucker are great bodies to throw at LeBron and Kawhi, it's LeBron and Kawhi, and it's just too much for the Rockets to handle. And Anthony Davis is a perfect matchup for Joel Embiid, both offensively and defensively. And also, the three-peat fatigue is starting to kick in for the Houston Rockets, and the Lakers end up taking down the Rockets and advancing to the NBA Finals to be matched up with a completely different Miami Heat team led by James Harden and Kemba Walker. And I'm sorry, but the Los Angeles Lakers again are just too much, and they beat the Heat in 5 games to still become your 2020 NBA champions with LeBron James winning Finals MVP. So there you have it. My goodness. As far as the Oklahoma City Thunder, if they paid James Harden, yes, they would have gotten a championship, but it didn't end up being the true dynasty that people think it would have been, simply because of how those pieces fit together. The Thunder also don't nearly have as bright of a future as they do right now in real life. However, they still got that one championship, right? OKC fans watching right now, let me know in the comment section if you would rather have that one championship and have not so good of a future going into the 2020s, or just have it play out like it did in real life and have the core and the picks that you guys have right now. Kevin Durant still ends up being a 2-time champion with 2 Finals MVPs, except this time he wins one of those with OKC and only 1 in Golden State instead of 2. Russell Westbrook and James Harden are champions, albeit not being the best player on that team. LeBron James's legacy honestly barely gets affected in this timeline, except for how much you would value his 2020 ring given that they have Kawhi as well. And speaking of Kawhi, well, he doesn't end up winning his 2019 ring or his Finals MVP, and is if anything looked more down upon after joining the Lakers after losing in the NBA Finals in that fashion. The Houston Rockets, however, very surprisingly ended up being much better off without that trade than they do with trading for James Harden. With the transaction that kickstarted it off was actually them making a big trade package for the number 2 overall pick in the 2013 draft to draft just Victor Oladipo. And the reason I say just is not to disrespect Victor Oladipo, but it's because what stemmed from them drafting Victor Oladipo was Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler, Chris Paul, even Paul Millsap. And in this what if, they end up being 2-time champions, and individually Chris Paul might be the biggest winner of this what if, because Chris Paul ends this what if with 2 championships and 2 Finals MVPs, immediately being considered the 2nd or 3rd best point guard of all time. And the conversation between who's better between Chris Paul and Steph Curry all time is actually a legitimate conversation in this scenario. Look, man, this video took a long time to make. I'm gonna record my Audacity recording right now, and this thing is literally an hour and 11 minutes long, and I still haven't edited. I would love to make more grand, big projects like this for you guys. But if you guys want to support me in creating content like this, you can do 3 simple things that would help me tremendously in fighting this algorithm battle. Number 1, leave a like on this video and subscribe. It tells the algorithm that this was a good video. It's gonna push it more. Number 2, turn on noties, become a part of Noti Gang. Number 3, follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/bsouls_. I stream 2K on there multiple times a week. I get to talk to y'all more closely. I stream the Let's Keep It a Buck podcast on there every Sunday, 10 p.m. Eastern. And if I can make that a legitimate source of income, then I become less reliant on getting so many views on YouTube. But everything I just said, it's all free. Y'all don't have to do it if you guys don't want to. But again, if you do, I would appreciate that heavily. At the end of the day, it's up to y'all. I just hope you guys enjoyed this video you're watching right here. Thank you for your time. I will see y'all next time, and I am out. Deuces.